Donald Trump cannot keep this Epstein scandal out of the news or out of Congress's purview, even with what you see, a lot of other things going on today. The House Oversight Committee probing those last Epstein days, which were under the oversight of the Trump DOJ and Bill Barr. They heard from Tova Noel. That's a former corrections officer who was crucial in the period leading up to Epstein's death. This was private testimony. Noel had already told federal investigators, as we've mentioned in some of our prior reporting, that she believes, based on her service there, that she was the last person to see Epstein alive. She says, inmate counts around 10 p.m. After that check, she and a colleague, though, didn't do the other required checks. And as we showed you in this timeline where we meticulously used prior government information and newly revealed materials from the Epstein files, there were a lot of questions on how the Trump DOJ and Bill Barr's team dealt with what were those final days, questions of negligence or worse, before Epstein was allowed to do something that inmates are not supposed to be able to do in custody, which is allegedly take their own life or die. In another protocol violation, they failed to do required overnight checks, the inmate counts every 30 minutes, which was part of the protection and the whole point of having him in this special unit. Instead, he's alone and unmonitored for 8 hours. This new law famously forced out the secret internal documents from the same probe, showing other views within the FBI about the last person near Epstein's cell. And that night, a blurry orange figure appears. The original FBI log calls it that flash of orange could possibly be an inmate. And note that careful description, because then the DOJ review of the same footage changes it to write, quote, inmates are currently on lockdown. It's possible someone is carrying inmate linen up the stairs. Was that a good faith mistake or a malicious cover-up? DOJ indicted the guards on duty that night for lying about the inmate checks that never happened. That's a big deal. It added pressure, though, for those guards to cooperate in the probe, and the DOJ later dropped those same charges. That's some of what we've been detailing. Congresswoman Stansbury, who was attending this high-stakes interview today, does describe Noel as forthcoming, saying they focused on the details of the night, some of which I touched on there, and those questions, and also discussing the loss of her job.
My takeaway is two things. One, the system once again failed survivors. It was clear incompetence and just a lack of oversight.
She does feel like her termination was unfair, and that had it not been Jeffrey Epstein, she would not have been fired.
She didn't do her job, but it seemed like people weren't doing their job generally at the MCC.
We're now joined by Democratic Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury on that critical House Oversight Committee. Welcome back. What do you think Congress learned today that's important in a series of events that we and other outlets have documented showed incompetence, failures, if not worse, from the then Trump DOJ overseeing that prison?
Well, I certainly agree with my colleague from Virginia, which is that the system over and over again has failed survivors. And, you know, this was the first time that we've heard from Ms. Noel about her firsthand account of what happened that night. She herself stated in that interview that she does believe that it was a suicide, but she did say that there were irregularities, not just that evening, but in general, that there was understaffing, that she and her colleagues had been working long hours and doubles, that they had not done the normal checks. But my takeaway from the interview was not that it was unusual per Epstein. In fact, I asked her that question. Was there anything weird about that night or unusual about how the situation was handled? And she said no. But it's clear that the system was not well managed, and that she feels, in her opinion, that she was terminated and indicated that it was unfair. Had it been any other inmate, the way the system was being managed, that she would not have been fired.
Well, I mean, of all the issues here, I don't think whether the guards were sanctioned in the right way is high on anyone's priority list. They failed to do the checks. The night they failed to do the checks, he's found dead. There were, as you know, allegations of the shredded documents that have now been proven. She may or may not have had visibility on that. But again, that goes to what was going on inside the prison. There were these payments. I wanted to ask you about this. that apparently you and your colleagues asked about financial payments she got in these increments before the Epstein death. She said that was from working overtime. Did that all scan to you? And do you think that she and others could shed any light on how Epstein got special treatment? Because while if it were chess, guards are like pawns, and the accountability doesn't stop with them. But I've read the IG report. Epstein was granted these exceptions. He was using the phone call. He had a final phone call leading up to the night of his death that was on the non-recorded line, which was only allowed because a different guard, I should mention, but a guard walked him to be allowed that. I mean, there's a lot of these type of problems. So your view on those issues and her credibility today?
Yeah, I mean, I'm only here to report on the actual deposition that I sat in parts of today. I can't speak to the broader management of the prison itself. But what I can say is that she did validate that there was special treatment of Jeffrey Epstein. She said that he was given access to a CPAP, that he had special sheets, and that all indications were that he was being given special treatment inside the jail. But I specifically asked her whether she felt that there were those inside the prison, either in the management or in the guards or other prisoners who wished Jeffrey Epstein harm. And she said no. She also talked about witnessing the body as it was removed. So, there were absolutely irregularities in the prison, but I don't think that of the members and staff that were in the room, we walked away with the impression that outside of just blatant incompetence and mismanagement, that there was a larger conspiracy at hand based on her testimony. It doesn't mean that there wasn't, but based on what we witnessed in the room today. Now, with respect to these payments, what she stated in the room was that they were cash payments that she deposited herself. She said multiple times under oath that they had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein, but I offered her the opportunity at the end of the day to clarify the source of the payments, and she declined. So,
yeah. So, what would cash payments be? I mean, it doesn't sound like something that would be connected to normal employ.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were other parts of the interview that happened while I was not in the room in which she clarified that she was working potentially other jobs and overtime. But like I said, during the portion of the interview where I asked if she wanted to clarify for the record, she declined to do so.